My name is Juan Bermejo Vega, and I'm a researcher at the University of Granada. I work on quantum computation, and I'm a physicist and a computer scientist. To understand quantum computing a bit better, we need to understand two things. One thing is computers, and one thing is quantum. So computers is something we use every day. These are tools we use to solve problems. Quantum is a bit more weird. We might be used, however, to being in a bar with colleagues, and we might be used to having a conversation with colleagues in a bar. And sometimes when it's late and there is noise, the conversation gets kind of dirty and incomprehensible. And this is something we call, in physics, we may call it incoherence. Systems behave in a simpler way, the physics of systems behaves in a simpler way when there is noise. And this happens to atoms. Atoms are normally surrounded by noise. And in quantum computing, we remove that noise away from atoms, and then they exhibit richer behavior. They have like a richer conversation, and they exhibit new effects. And we try to use these effects to accelerate the speed of calculations. And that type of computer is a quantum computer. What motivated me to work on this is actually, well, kind of maybe simple. When I was younger and more inexperienced, I used to be a nerd, and I was fascinated by video games and stars. And then I later learned that in quantum computing, you can study how quantum physics interplays with the way we do algorithms, the way we solve problems in a computer, and that can be used to make problems being solved faster with less energy and with less computational effort. And myself, I want to understand the physical phenomena, the fundamental ingredients that make quantum computers solve problems faster. In my research work, it is very challenging. What is very challenging of my research work is that quantum computers are extremely hard to build, extraordinarily hard to implement. Technologically, it requires a standard type of technology that we do not have yet, called quantum error correction. And it's also fairly hard to find problems for which quantum computers offer computational advantages. We do know several problems, like problems in simulation, problems in cryptography, but generally they're quite hard to find. And this is actually a challenge that these two challenges we expect to be doing progress in solving them in the next 10 to 20 years. My current research project at University of Granada is Marie Curie Athena 3i project, and it's about finding applications of small quantum devices that we have today. Today we do have quantum computers, but they are kind of crappy and they are kind of small. They have 250, 100, 1000 quantum bits, depending on how complicated the quantum computer is. But they are very small, and it's not actually easy to run codes on them because they are so small. And we try to find what we can do, what can we do with these small quantum devices here. Also, they are very, very noisy, these devices, and we try to find how to benchmark them, how to verify that they're actually working. And these are like the two main things that I do in the research project. Apart from being a researcher, I'm also an activist. I do activism for diversity, inclusion, and improving working conditions in research, in science and technology, in particular in my field, in quantum information. I got interested in activism when I was a PhD researcher. I was then at the Max Planck Institute of Quantum Optics doing my PhD in Germany, in Munich. And I became a PhD researcher representative at my institute. I got them interested in problems related to working conditions and mental health among the PhD researchers, and also some problems with harassment. Inside this network, we co-founded a small group to work on issues related to diversity and equal opportunity of PhD researchers. That means research problems of women or people of color, LGBTQ plus people, or people with chronic conditions, disabilities, generally people that have some problem of not being privileged and they were working in science. So the challenges that motivate me in my activism is that I think the model of science and technology that we have, I think, is flawed. As scientists, we are trained to compete from the very beginning. We are trained to compete against each other in order to publish, and we have this publish or perish culture, and that leads to us competing with each other. And this is at contradiction with the idea of science being for society. I think that's one important challenge. The model of science that we have, on the other hand, what it does very well is to promote productivity. It's very hard to get a permanent position at university. You have to work many years as a PhD researcher and then as a postdoc, and produce a high amount of papers. And I believe that this is constructed in this way to favor productivity as opposed to societal advantage. In order to favor productivity, I think the model creates a hierarchy as well. And this hierarchy pushes away from science and technology to minorities and women, to women, people of color, queer people, LGBTQI people, and people with chronic conditions. And I think that having this hierarchy is done so that people are less united. This actually is an advantage in order to increase the productivity of the model. And in other words, it's actually a strategy to control the workforce. I believe that it's important for us scientists to reclaim science, to reclaim a science that is not only about producing scientific results, but it's also for the scientists, for the people. And I think for this we need to rehumanize science. I think this is a very complicated problem. This is a huge challenge. It cannot be solved at once, and for this we need to split this problem into tiny steps. I think it is important for scientists generally over the world to network, to unionize, to create communities. It is important before we try to reach any kind of political change, we need to have a structure to ask for it, so to say. This reminds me that during my PhD time in Germany, in Spain, PhD researchers managed to get important improvements in their working conditions, in particular better contracts. And the way this was done is by creating networks and asking for concrete improvements, normally calling the press, striking, and eventually getting politicians interested in the issues of scientists. So my current activism work is focused on this idea, the idea of creating scientific communities. Elaborating on this, I think conferences as we have them today, which is the place where we usually network in science, are very good for displaying scientific results. This is the place where we normally present our work, and this is the hub where we normally meet. But they do not work as communities. A community is normally a more complicated, more complex environment. It's an environment where we also find emotional support, where we also care about each other, and where we also build self-support caring networks. In particular, it should be a place where we also talk about the issues of scientists as humans. And normally in conferences, we only talk about our work, normally do not talk about the issues of scientists. I am involved in one particular project, which is collaborative. It's not just by myself, which is called the Q-Turn project. And this is a project to make a series of conferences, of workshops in our research field, where we discuss science, but also discuss the issues of scientists. We have scientific invited talks, contributed talks, we have posters, and all of the usual stuff. But also we try to do a tiny change of concept, and we add some talks, some sessions, some discussions on the issues of scientists, like working conditions, like diversity, inclusion, implicit bias, gender in science, or mental health, or issues of minorities in academia, like the queer community or people of color. And we try to put these type of sessions in the same program. So in order to turn conferences into communities of scientists, we need to take care of aspects of the environment, like very simple aspects. Like one very simple one is that everyone feels safe at your event. So it is known that harassment is a problem in all aspects of society, and it's also present in the workplace. And in particular, it also happens at conferences, for example. And some particular thing that you can do to make your events safer is to have things like anti-harassment protocols, or what is called codes of conduct, Other details that help people feeling comfortable at your event, which are also very simple, is like having gender-neutral bathrooms. Of course, having an accessible building. Some people cannot access your building if they are on a wheelchair and your building doesn't have an entrance for people who are on wheelchairs. Another thing which is important is, well, there is people with audition, hearing problems, and it's important to have microphones in your event. Or sometimes some people have problems in... Some people cannot see your slides very well because they have some vision problems, so it's important to use slides that are simple and let people see them without any kind of obstacle. I'm a queer trans woman. There are not that many queer or trans women in my field or research, or in research at all, but queer trans women exist and we are here. And we're here to show up. Coming out as a transgender scientist was not easy. It took me, it was a very long process. It took me years. In fact, I still feel often that it's still coming out. I believe that coming out is a lifelong journey, but it wasn't easy. I started having gender doubts when I left university very heavily, when I started my PhD in 2010. And I quite did not accept that maybe I wasn't a man until maybe 2012. That's when I started thinking seriously about it, in 2013. Then I had a very crap psychologist who put me back in the closet, and then I left the closet finally in 2017 and 18 and 19. It was a very spread process in Berlin when I was a postdoc. Discrimination of LGBTQ people is very present in society. It's present in interviews, and when you come out, you are normally afraid of losing jobs. This is always very present, and some challenges are more invisible. And society is very queer-phobic. And science is made of people, so because science is made of people, science is also queer-phobic, basically. That's not an insult to any of you. Every one of us has internalized queer phobias, and I had to work with my own internalized queerphobia and transphobia. And what we see in data is that LGBTQ scientists are often for very long in the closet, and there were some studies and reports done in the UK among LGBTQ plus scientists in the physical sciences. And I think they saw one made by EOP that 44% of gay men were inside the closet at work in physics. And it was even less for lesbian women, and it was like 14% for bisexual people, which is really very, very tiny, considering how many bisexual people there are in the world, bisexual, pansexual, and plurisexuals. And then you were in some other label, then it was also like very small, it was like 14%. And this points towards people not feeling comfortable at work when they are queer because they do not quite come out. And of course, among trans people, it happens a lot. Transgender people are, this is like a very complicated, we are one of the most oppressed communities among the LGBTQ collective. We are very, very afraid of discrimination when we come out. It's very hard to go to interviews when you are doing your paperwork or when you are not sure that your gender identity is going to be respected, when you have an ID that doesn't match your name. When I came out at work, I would have liked to have, above all, is more colleagues that would understand what being trans means. Of course, more trans colleagues. I do have trans colleagues, but we are all very far away from each other. Like, each of us is in a different country and institution, and we don't see each other very often. So when I came out, apart from all of the challenges and obstacles and barriers, there's this feeling that you are kind of alone. And also you are walking a sort of new path that nobody tells you how to walk. It's actually very useful when you have an older trans role model to walk this path. We don't live in a world where we don't say we are queer at work because we just choose not to. Particularly in science, work is a very diffuse concept in science. Work in science is a community of researchers where you live for many, many years. Your PhD takes like 5 years, a postdoc is like 1, 2, 3, you're very lucky, years. And then you do several postdocs, and then by the time you get an academic position, might have done like 2 or 3 postdocs, and might have worked in your field for 15 to 20 years. So that's not quite a place where you just pass by, right? So it's not like you just pass by in a place and you don't say you're queer because, well, you don't care, you don't live there. It's a place where you spend a lot of time. So this amount of people who do not come out in science, this number is really, really worrying. It tells us that there is something wrong in the culture of science, that these people do not feel comfortable at work. And we should all be comfortable at work. It's where we spend a huge portion of our lives, and also we have labor rights.